Hi guys, Russia started the second part of the war, this time focusing on the eastern Ukraine. In this video, let's see what Putin really wants and what are the chances of him completing any declared military goals. The original plan of Ukraine capitulating within 48 hours failed completely and miserably, and Russia lost 20,000 troops on the battlefields. This high number was claimed by Ukraine for a very long time, and many Western observers felt skeptical and called this data overestimation, but recently both US and independent investigator Christo Grozny from Bellingcat found these numbers quite adequate. Probably at least 3 more times soldiers are injured, resulting in 80,000 Russian troops are off the battlefield. The number of killed Ukrainian soldiers varies. The Ukrainian estimates are 3,000 and independent US estimate was 2,000 to 4,000 on March 9, which is a bit outdated, but most of the military casualties happened within the first 2 weeks of war. At least Ukrainian data claims 12,000 of Russian soldiers dead on March 9. Using simple math, we can adjust US estimates to 3,300 to 6,600 Ukrainian casualties at the moment, meaning that Ukrainian army is 3 to 6 times more efficient than Russian counterpart. The question now is, what are the chances that Putin can win the battle over the Donbass? Let's compare now versus past and see which side gets the advantage. First, the majority of Russian troops relocated in eastern Ukraine right now, and some Western estimates give us the ratio of 5 to 1 to Ukrainian forces. This gives Russia an advantage. 2. The military tactics remains roughly the same, meaning that Ukrainians is a modern NATO-trained army and every unit and soldiers can make independent decisions of when and how to attack the enemy. Russian soldiers are dumb and fully controlled by their commandment. Sure, Russia probably learned some lessons from their previous loss and got some new, quite experienced commander who was quite successful in Syria, but the Russian commandment doesn't have any experience operating that large of troops on that small of an area. It's like managing huge companies. At some point, an increased number of employees decrease your output because management is getting too complex. That gives a point to Ukraine. 3. Weaponry. Russia has lots of tanks and armored vehicles. The problem is that not all of that stuff is new. There was a report of some battle groups containing 4 different generations of tanks, which is crazy, and some of that old crap literally breaks down on the field and has very little advantage against modern warfare. The age of average military equipment of Russia has decreased since the first part of the war. This is a point to Ukraine. 4. From the Ukrainian side, it's the opposite. NATO brought times more of anti-tank and anti-aircraft javelins and stingers. Most of Turkish Bayraktar drones are undamaged and extremely successful, and the American, far more superior drones MQ-9 Reaper are quite likely to be delivered very soon. Recently added British Starstreak are proved to be quite efficient in shutting down the planes, significantly reducing possibilities of Russian aviation. Switchblade kamikaze drone are already in Ukraine. They were not being used in the first part of the war, but now they can be quite a game changer. This is a big plus to Ukraine. 5. Donbass is heavily fortified by Ukrainians for the last 8 years of the war, contrary to zero fortification around Kiev, Kharkiv and the rest of the northern Ukraine. Another point to Ukraine. 6. Civilians are generally out of that part of Donbass, meaning that Ukraine can do more aggressive offenses, which is another point to Ukraine. 7. Weather and season. It was winter and now it's a blooming spring. Trees are getting greener and visibility is getting worse, which is much better for guerrilla war from one side, but allows the enemy to hide at the same point. I'm not sure who gets the advantage here. 8. Motivation. Russians are not motivated at all, but now they know that the war is real. They have a chance to resign, since officially it's a military operation, not a war, and some of them actually did it, meaning that the average motivation of Russian soldiers actually goes up. Ukrainians are still motivated, but quite tired, and psychologically speaking, it's no longer a war for Ukraine, but a war for Donbass region, which might reduce some of the motivation. This is a point to Russia. 9. Ritualistics around the dates. Putin is a superstitious old man and rituals for him are super important. There are 2 dates before which the army is trying to capture at least something. First is Orthodox Easter on April 24 and the next is May 9, which is the day of supposed Russian victory in the Second World War. The whole invasion of Ukraine is based on the cult of the winner of World War II. Basically, the Soviet Union is like Jesus who sacrificed himself for humanity, and the evil West didn't acknowledge that heroic act, resurrected fascism in Ukraine, and now it's time for revenge. For Putin, it's crucial to have a military parade on May 9 somewhere, preferably in Mariupol. This forces the Russian military to push and make some mistakes, and this is the point to Ukraine. As you can see, Ukraine rather has an advantage of the upcoming battle, and the most important, it's the last chance of Russia to do any land offense. If they lose another 80,000 troops, they won't be able to do any offense, and only the trench war will be an option. The only way for Russia to replenish the number of cannon fodder is to have martial law. And this is something Russia was considering doing for a very long time, and there were a bunch of false flag attacks on Russian villages to create a legal ground for that. But they decided not to do this for now because Russians don't want to die for Putin. There is a huge effort right now to hire more soldiers to the contract army, but no one wants to go. Despite a strong media narrative that 80% of Russians support the war, it's far away from new Nazi Germany. Russians don't have any unifying idea of great empire, and Putin knows it. There is a strong supporter of Russian imperial ideas, Igor Strelkov. He was the main general on the field in Donbass back in 2014. Then he got into some conflict with the Kremlin, and now he's not taking any role in the current invasion, but gives lots of interesting commentaries. Strelkov thinks that Russia has no chance to win that war, neither take over Donbass without martial law. And I have no respect to that bastard, but I acknowledge his expertise and experience. And there is another Russian imperialist, Russian Dyomushkin, acting independently of Kremlin, and he has similar views. Speaking about Russian long-range missiles, which were extremely efficient in the first part of the war in destruction of Ukrainian infrastructure. Now, most of Ukrainian cities have an adequate anti-missile system thanks to the recent deliveries from Slovakia. After the Russian-led warship Moscow has sunk, Putin launched an unprecedented missile strike for the last 3 days. My mom told me that sirens are on all night in the city where they stay, but so far the destruction is nothing compared to what it was during the first week of war. Yesterday they attacked Lviv, a city which is really far away from Russia, probably because they realized that anti-missile system is the weakest there. The 900,000 caliber missiles managed to destroy the car mechanic garage, but Russian officials claim that it was a local command center of the Ukrainian army. Russia is a new Palestine, both in strategies and lies. The good thing about missiles, Russia can't replenish them for a reason that some of the crucial parts were imported from abroad, and now, due to the sanctions, it's nearly impossible to get them. Same things applies for the modern optics which proper Russian tanks are using. So, what are the scenarios for the upcoming war? First, Russia can take the whole Donbass. This is the worst scenario. It is possible, but quite unlikely for the reason I've mentioned above. If this happens, they will go further north and capture even more land, and it's hard to predict the outcome at that point. But there are no scenarios of capturing Kiev and Kharkiv. You need to have at least 10x of troops to do that. Second, middle scenario. Russia takes Mariupol, very limited gains in the rest of Donbass. The Russian army is depleted, but still okay for a trench war for several years. In that scenario, Russia can claim victory, saying that a special military operation was to make a land corridor to Crimea and providing water supply through North Crimean Canal, which was illegally blocked by Nazi Ukrainians in 2014. The Russians changed the objectives of that so-called military operation several times. They can do it once more. And the land corridor is quite an achievement. That would mean that 3 relatively big Ukrainian cities will be under Russian control: Mariupol, Kherson and Melitopol. Mariupol is heavily destroyed, probably 95% of buildings are completely damaged and likely will be depopulated or reduced to a very small town. But Kherson and Melitopol were not damaged by the war at all, and Russia already is making the Ukrainianization there by detaining and deporting local population, prohibiting Ukrainian language and culture, creating puppet gulag state. At that point, Russia could freeze the conflict without signing anything with Ukraine. Putin loves unsolved conflicts and status quo. That's exactly what happened in Crimea, Donbass, Georgia and Moldova. The West, although it supports Ukraine a lot, is still weak. The recent rhetoric after the Bucha massacre changed a lot, but the actions are not there. The European Union is still buying gas and oil from Russia, effectively giving Putin's regime $1 billion per day. Ukraine is still not getting enough of offensive weapons to be able to recapture the land. If Putin offers status quo at some point, the West, tired of the war, will likely follow and stop providing Ukraine with additional weapons, effectively accepting Ukrainian territorial loss as it was back in 2014. This is not the best scenario, but I think this is the most likely one. 3. Russian forces will be decimated by Ukraine, and the West will provide more offensive weaponry to unblock Mariupol and recapture the rest of the land. In this case, Russia will have to retract to pre-February 24th border and accept the loss. This is a quite optimistic scenario and depends on many ifs, but it's possible. Currently, Mariupol is officially blocked, but we have confirmed report that in the past there were several successful attempts to land there with helicopters, bringing weapons and picking up injured people. Recently, it is getting harder because Russians discovered that path, and it's unclear whether there is another way to help Mariupol at that point. In any case, 55 plus days of heroic fight is something no one thought was possible. It is highly likely that they can stay there and fight for several more weeks or even months. There could be many scenarios in the middle between 2 and 3. For example, the city of Kherson is located on the other side of the river, and military speaking, it is quite hard to control it for a long time. There were rumors of possible voluntary Russian withdrawal because Russia has no budget for a proper occupation, and I think it's quite real as soon as the Russian offensive potential is over. Another possibility is that Russia might give some leftovers of Mariupol back to Ukraine and keep only the area with the water flow to Crimea to prevent Ukraine from blocking it again. Finally, there are apocalyptic scenarios where Russia will use nuclear weapons. Nothing is impossible now, and recently Zelensky warned again that Russia is ready to use them. But there are two types of nukes. One which destroys the whole city and starts the nuclear war, another called tactical nuclear weapons, which destroy an army or infrastructure. Basically, it's a way smaller thing. Destruction of whole cities is highly unlikely. Even if Putin is crazy, you need to have an approval of 5 more people to launch that kind of a nuke. There is an internal whistleblower in the Russian FSB who warned Bellingcat that Putin was considering using tactical nuclear weapons back in December 2021 against NATO countries to show seriousness of Russia. And the whistleblower was shocked by that. Now, the same source, which seems to be legit because many other things got confirmed, claims that there are not enough people in the decision chains and they won't allow any nukes to happen. Second thing, China won't approve that. They don't want Putin to destroy the planet. And that will be the end of Putin's regime. Using tactical nuclear weapons against the Ukrainian army is possible, but it's unlikely to be decisive or effective. Plus, what if the missile will be intercepted by the Ukrainian anti-missile system? Very high risks for nothing. Another problem is that Ukraine has a capacity of doing horrible things to Russia. Zelensky presidential advisor Arestovich explicitly said that Russia is aware about something very destructive Ukrainians can do without specifying what it is, and that's the reason why they are afraid of further escalation. Finally, I don't believe Putin is crazy. He started the war under the assumption that Ukrainian army capitulate in 48 hours. The West agreed with that statement and promised not to send their troops there, silently allowing Putin to start the war. But the reality was different. Putin lost the war and now trying to achieve at least some neutral result, not a complete loss. His goal number 1 is to be a totalitarian leader of Russia until the end of his life. And he managed to achieve this quite well by banning all the alternative medias and forcing all educated anti-Putin Russians to immigrate. There is still chance for a coup. We have a bunch of rumors of arrest of various FSB officials and other people responsible for misinforming Putin about the real situation in Ukraine. The Russian Minister of Defense, Shoigu, is gone again. The rumors are that he got a massive heart attack, but we can't confirm it. It's extremely hard to predict the coup, but based on historical examples, this is almost inevitable. Another thing is sanctions. There are some reports online that sanctions are not working and actually damaging more the West than Russia. The Russian ruble is doing quite okay and regained most of its value recently. I strongly disagree. The reason why sanctions are not working yet is that Russia prepared well this time and has lots of extra resources to be able to artificially pump the financial market for quite an extended time. But sooner or later, there will be a huge drop. The goal of Putin now is to prevent this fall as long as possible, tricking the general population that everything will be fine and convincing the West that more sanctions is not a solution. But I think in a couple of months or definitely half a year, there will be quite tough consequences. Around the year 2014, when Crimea happened, Russian GDP per capita shrunk by 35%, which is a lot. One of the principal reasons for that was the 50% drop in the crude oil price. The situation now is quite different, and the oil actually regained its value to the level of 2014. And the best sanctions would be to increase the output of the oil and drop the prices. But for that we need Trump, not Biden. But even with a much lower potential drop of GDP this time, the prices of basic commodities in Russia will increase exponentially due to the trade limitations. For something you can buy for $1 in the rest of the world, you would have to pay $2. Sooner or later, the population will feel it en masse, and Putin's popularity might sink, and mass protest can shake the absolute power. Thanks for watching, let me know what you think, don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye!